I want to thank those who have been praying for our church during this lockdown. During the lockdown, pretty much every day we had a prayer meeting on Zoom, and some days we had 2 or 3. And Mosaic had a prayer meeting, a weekly prayer meeting as well. I know the Cantonese congregation had prayer meetings, Encounter had prayer meetings. So just want to really thank those of you who've joined and prayed together. And I really want to thank those who have been giving faithfully with your tithes and offerings. Maybe I should speak on behalf of the staff of our church, the employed people in our church, that we didn't get our salaries cut. And we didn't get fired because we didn't have any money. So we are very grateful for that. So if you've been faithfully giving over the last 3 months to our church, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for that. So that's pretty much what I want to thank most of all. I want to thank the staff too, Amazon staff of our church. I think the staff have worked hard and tried to do their best. And let's give everyone a staff. They've done their best, and it's been quite difficult. It's been a real challenge. So thank you to them. The theme that we had for our anniversary last year, our 30th anniversary, was from Jeremiah 29:11, where it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord." But it goes on. It says, "Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And I really do believe that our church is entering into a new season. I think every church actually in Christchurch is entering into a new season, and we're not quite sure what it involves. But I believe for us in our church that we've spent 30 years putting down our roots, trying to become mature and a stable church. And I think the next season will be branching out and reaching out to our city. And not just to Chinese people, but to the whole community. So it's quite exciting times. So anyway, I want us to read something from the Bible. We'll just read the first 7 verses of John chapter 12. Is that okay? Okay. Read nice and loud in English. Okay. Turn it on. Here we go. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honour. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard and an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. "Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages." He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. "Leave her alone," Jesus replied. "It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." Father in heaven, I just pray that you will help me to share the things that you've put on my heart tonight, and I pray that you help us all to focus. Many things go around in our mind, distract us, but I pray, Lord, that the Holy Spirit will speak to each of us tonight. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So I've been talking about only Jesus. I have one more to go, and then we're going to have a guest speaker, so that's good, isn't it? This one tonight is only Jesus is worthy of our heart and soul. So the story that we just read is a true story, and it's the story of a woman who gave her heart and her soul to Jesus. It's a story of extravagant love an extravagant and a generous love. A love so deep and so powerful that it doesn't bother to count the cost. I wonder if you've ever loved someone like that. You love them so much that you don't bother about the cost. Whatever it costs. Time, money, whatever. Oh, jealous. Oh, I can't talk about your husband's like that. So nice. Well, the Bible describes this kind of love as our first love. Not the first person that we love, but the first part of our love in any relationship. It's a kind of an intense, deep, extravagant, generous kind of love. Sadly, often it doesn't last forever. So that's why in Revelation, Jesus was speaking to one of the churches, and he said, look, I know you guys, you've been faithful, you've persevered, you worked hard, but this one thing I have to tell you. You have forsaken your first love. The love that they had at the beginning, the love that they had for the Lord at the beginning, they had drifted away from that. And this love that Mary has here in this story is a very generous and it's a really extravagant kind of a love. To illustrate this, I will tell you a true story. There was once a young man, and he fell in love with a beautiful young woman. And so he decided that he would like to marry her. So the day came, and he got down on his knee, and he took her hand in his hand, and he looked up into her eyes, and he said those amazing words, "Will you marry me?" And she replied. Guess what she said? She said, "Let me think about it." Because she'd only been together for 6 months. I'd been together for 6 months. I was a little bit shocked to her. She said, "Let me think about it." Well, inside the young man was completely crushed. But on the outside, he was very mature, and he said, "Of course, honey. Of course, you take a day to think about it. Take 2 days." She said, "Give me a week." Well, the good news is that after 2 days, she came back and she said, "I would like to be your wife." Now, where's my ring? Now, where's my ring? And this is the part of the story this is the point of the story. This young man was not what you call a wealthy young man. The previous 10 years, he had earned very little money. 4 years as a theological student, didn't earn much money. 2 years as a part-time youth worker, earning $100 a week, not much money. And then the last 4 years had been as a missionary, where he didn't really have an income at all. Some mission organisations are very good, they support their missionaries very well. Some mission organisations are not, and he was in one of those kind of mission organisations. So all he had in the world, all he had his total earthly wealth was 800 New Zealand dollars, which he had been saving up to get on an aeroplane, return to New Zealand to see his mother. So you know what he did? Guess what he did? He took all that $800, the whole lot, well, excluding maybe a tiny little bit when he bought some roses. But the rest of it he gave to his friend who was working in a Hong Kong gold and diamond shop, and said to her, "Could you please buy me the biggest ring you can get for $800?" So she came back with a 0.42 carat diamond ring, which is on Becky's finger. Yeah. Now, when you really love someone, you do not count the costs, okay? You don't care. Sadly, it kind of wears off. That kind of love sometimes wears off a little bit. So later in life, one day when she's looking at her 0.42 carat diamond ring, she thinks, yes, it's not really big enough. How about a bigger one? And then what's the immediate thing that you think about when she says that?
The husband was so good.
No, the immediate thing that someone would think about.
Price?
Yes. How much is it going to cost? How much is it going to cost?
8,000.
18,000. It's a very sad thing that often that first love wears off after a while. But for Mary, in the story, her love was so extravagant and so amazing, and she didn't count the cost. So if you've got a Bible, John chapter 12, you can follow along. John chapter 12. And we read in John chapter 12 that in verse 1, Jesus goes to a home where there is Mary, her sister Martha, and her brother Lazarus. And they're having a meal in honour of Jesus. And it says here, in verse 3, Mary took about a pint of pure nard. Okay, so I've got a little bottle here. A pint is a bit bigger than this. A pint is half a litre. Used to get a pint of milk. It's a bit bigger than this. Pure nard. Nard comes from a very rare tree in northern India. It was a very expensive perfume. And it says that she poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Mark tells us that the jar was actually alabaster. Do you know what alabaster is? What is alabaster? Huh?
Very fancy stuff.
Very
Fancy stuff.
yeah, it's true, yeah. Very fancy stone. A bit like jade. You can kind of see through it. And it's often it's white. I have a picture here. Oh, there's Mary. It's kind of translucent a little bit. It's very, very expensive stuff. Alabaster. And often the jars in those days, they would have a long neck. And she broke it. And she poured out the whole lot. Mark says this was a very expensive perfume. Here in John, he tells us how much it cost. It was worth about a year's wages. How much is a year's wages in New Zealand?
42,000.
Let's average about 50,000, right? About 50,000. $50,000 poured out in one go. Now there are some very nice perfumes in the world. One of the most famous is Chanel No. 5. And there are probably different levels of Chanel No. 5, but if you want the best, if you want the purest, if you want the original, it will cost you $4,200 per ounce.
Wow.
How many ounces in a pint? How many ounces in a pint? We're all in litres and millilitres. That's 16, all right? 16. 16 times 4,200 equals about 67,000. How much?
7,200.
Yes, very good. About 67,000. Or 100,000 New Zealand dollars. 100,000 New Zealand dollars. So, all you ladies,
Yes.
imagine something. You are at home, and your husband comes home, and he says, "Honey, I bought you a gift. He says, I've got you 16 ounces of Chanel No. 5. And you say to him, "Oh, honey, that must have cost a lot of money." And he said, "Yes, but for you, honey, I don't count the cost." And then he says to you, "Take a sip, my dear." He takes the top off the bottle and pours the whole lot over you. $100,000. Can you imagine someone would do something like that? Or even if it was $50,000. Even if it was $42,000.
Or even $100.
No, it was worth more than that. Incredible. Why did she do it? Mary loved Jesus more than anything. She loved him with a love that did not bother to count the cost. And I want to tell you about another story. It's another true story. And I think this one is even more amazing. When I read this story a few years ago, it really spoke to my heart. I've been thinking about it ever since. This was about 4 years ago. I didn't know about this woman, and then I read about her. And ever since I read about her, I've been thinking about her, waiting for another opportunity to talk about her. So tonight's the opportunity. Lilias Trotter was born into a wealthy family in London. She was a Christian, and she used to volunteer for the YWCA, the Young Women's Christian Association. She would go down out into the streets of London, and she would help particularly women who were caught in prostitution, sharing the gospel with them, trying to help them. She was also an artist, a painter. Never been to art school, but she's very, very gifted. Her father died when she was 12 years old. And so her mother basically raised her. And when she was in her early 20s, her mum took her to Venice, with the canals. Yeah. And they stayed in a fancy hotel. And there in the hotel was another guest, a man by the name of John Ruskin. Now, if you don't know who John Ruskin is, he was at that time the most famous art critic, artist, really in the English-speaking world. Very, very famous man. And so, like any good mother, with her arty kind of daughter, she wanted to introduce him to this man, and so she did. And this man was impressed with the girl's art. And so they corresponded for some years, and finally he invited her to his home in England. And he said to her, "You could have a brilliant future as an artist." He said, "I would like to take you as one of my disciples." And he had a number of famous disciples. Maybe because you're such a cultured group of people, maybe you will recognize some of these people. John Everett Milius was one of his disciples. You must know this painting. Moses, Aaron, Dante Gabriel Rossetti. I didn't know who this one was, okay, I confess. Holman Hunt. You must know who Holman Hunt is. He painted this very famous picture of Jesus knocking on the door. Ford Madox Brown. One of my most favourite paintings in the whole world. This painting of Jesus washing the feet of Peter. Turner. You must have heard of Turner. Oh, my cultured estimation of you has come down somewhat. But anyway, he had a lot of very famous disciples. And so he said to her, you could be one of the most famous artists in all of England. And she was extremely honoured. She was extremely shocked, stunned, and quite dazzled by this. And she wrote to one of her friends and she said, "He told me I would be the greatest living painter in all of England." He told me I would be the greatest living painter in all of England. On one condition. On one condition. He said, "You must give yourself totally to your art. You must give yourself totally to your art." But she was a Christian. She was a follower of Jesus. And so she struggled. And she knew that she could not devote her whole life to both her art and her Lord. And she had to make this decision. And the way she put it, the question she had in her mind was, am I willing to give up my own dreams to follow my true calling? Around the same time, she went to a Christian meeting. This is a photo of her. She went to this Christian meeting, and in the meeting, the pastor was preaching about missions. And he got to the end of his talk, and he said, "The Lord is calling someone here to go to North Africa." He said, "Who is it?" "The Lord is calling someone here to go as a missionary to North Africa." And Lilias said, "It's me. It's me. The Lord is calling me." So she decided to follow this calling. Her friends, her mother were shocked, completely shocked. John Ruskin was extremely disappointed by her decision. But in 1880, at the age of 35, Lily Strong gave up her dream. Instead of her dream of becoming an artist, she followed her calling of her Lord, and she becomes a missionary in North Africa. She left the luxuries of a wealthy life in London, and she went to the desert to share the gospel with Muslims. So she applied to a mission organisation to go, and they gave her the physical and the spiritual and the emotional tests and said, no, you can't go. You're too weak. Physically, you're not strong enough. So she decided that God had called her, so she and her two friends, they went by themselves. They went by themselves. And she said when they got there, when they got off the ship in Algeria, she said the three of us stood there looking at our mission field, not knowing anyone in this place, not knowing one sentence of Arabic, not a clue how to begin the work. We only knew we had to come. And then she said, truly, if God needed weakness, here were three weak people. And she prayed, they prayed that doors might be opened, that hearts might be opened, and that heaven might be opened. And she spent 40 years as a missionary in Algeria. She said that the Islamic people, that Islam was dry as the dune and hard as the gravel. And she said, as a mission worker in this place, it was like knocking her head against a brick wall. That's what it felt like for her. Some became Christians, but she said many of those were rejected by their families, they were beaten, and they were even poisoned to death. But every day she was there for 40 years, she wrote in her journal. And they still have these journals. And there's the artwork she painted what she saw, and apparently they're beautiful. There's a movie being made of her life. It's called Many Beautiful Things. It's called Many Beautiful Things because on her deathbed, when she was 75, she'd been there 40 years, she died in Africa. She was on her deathbed, and her friends were surrounding her bed, and she suddenly looked up and she said, 6 horses in a chariot. 6 horses in a chariot. And her friend said, you see beautiful things? And she said, many beautiful things. So they called the movie Many Beautiful Things. When I started reading about her, the more I read, the more deeply I was touched by her life. And you think, why did she do that? Why did she do it? Leave everything and go there like that. You think, well, why does anyone become a missionary? Why does anyone become a pastor? Why does anyone give money to a church? Why does anyone bother to give their energy and their time to help build the church? There's only one reason, isn't there? There's only one reason. It's because Jesus is worthy of our heart and our soul. Why did Mary do this? Why did she take that and pour it out? After the sermon this morning, Eric, the translator, he was talking to me and he said, I read that in those days every wealthy young woman was given one of these bottles, kind of like a dowry or something, and they only had one. And to break it was to kind of, was your whole future, was your whole life, economically was being poured out. I don't know whether that's true or not, but why did she do it? Because she loved Jesus. But if you look at the story, it's really interesting what happens next. Look at verse 4. It says, one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, he said, why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? What a waste. What a waste. It's worth a year's wages. You know? You have a young woman with such a gift, and she gives it up and she goes to the desert. What a waste. What a waste. He did not say this because he cared about the poor. He was a thief and his keeper of the money bag. So the 12 disciples, one of them was the treasurer, one was the guy who looked after the money. It was Judas. He looked after the money for the group. And he was dipping into it, helping himself. Judas was very different to Mary. Mary loved Jesus more than anything. And Judas loved money more than Jesus. The Bible talks a lot about money. The Bible says that the root of all evil is money. It doesn't say money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money. The love of money is the root of all evil. And I'm sure you know that some people have fallen into this trap where they do very bad things and very evil things sometimes for money. It can ruin people's lives. And it seems that Judas had fallen into this trap. He sold Jesus for how much? 30 pieces of silver. Money, if we're not careful, money can really take hold of your heart. And the antidote to money, the antidote to the love of money is to give. It really is. Greed and the love of money can really take hold of your heart and soul. And if you're not careful, it can ruin your life. And I really do believe that the antidote to that is to give. It somehow breaks the power in your life. And the Bible is really true. It says it's better to give than to receive. It sets your heart free. This story, I think, raises a really important question, I think. Here you have Mary, who loved Jesus more than anything. And there you have Judas, who loved money more than Jesus. And you've got to ask yourself, and I've got to ask myself, which one am I more like? Which one do I want to be like? And I just really want to encourage you that it's very easy to, as a Christian, you've been a Christian a while, it's very easy to drift, to wander, and to fall away, and to wander away. But it's really important that we put Jesus first in our life. And we're going to sing a song. Which song are we going to sing? Good. The one I chose. Yeah, good. Come up. And I really pray and hope that in your hearts, as we sing this song, that you can really recommit your life to Christ and give Him your heart and your soul completely. So I just want to pray. Why don't we all stand and just pray for us? Lord, I want to pray for myself and any of us here who have kind of a cold in our hearts. Maybe that first love for you has kind of cooled off a bit. I pray, Lord, that you will stir up our hearts to love you more and to be like me, not to count the cost, but just to do what we can and to follow you in a way that you really are the first in our life. And Lord, I thank you for this beautiful song we're about to sing. The words of this song, I give you my heart, I give you my soul. I pray that all of us tonight, we will sing this from our heart, that we will really mean it from our heart tonight. I pray this in Jesus' name.